alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a special episode. Kathrin Hutson, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's good to be back again.
Yeah, we just had you on, but or I should say I did, because the show is just me and my guests. But anyway,
Right.
this is a small racket we got going here, but it's the royal we, I guess. Anyway, so you've got a book coming out today, the day this episode drops. Is that true?
That is it. Today, May 26th. Yes. That is my 7th novel and the second book in my LGBTQ dystopian sci-fi series, which is Blue Helix. This book is Sleepwater Static. I'm super excited about it.
Okay, so that's the sequel to Sleepwater Beat, which is the first of these dystopian.
Yes, it is.
That you did. So what are these about? That's really what we're talking about today. What are these about, and what was your process in creating them, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I originally had created Sleepwater Beat. I finished writing that book in the fall of 2016, and actually right before the 2016 presidential elections in the United States. And it was very oddly timed, and pertinently timed in a very intensely eerie way that is still happening, actually, with every book in this series, which I guess, when you're writing dystopian sci-fi in such a very near future, that is bound to happen sooner or later, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, especially these days. So the basic premise of the Blue Helix books is that there is a smaller, minority group of people who have developed a mutation-like ability to elicit physical responses in people who hear them speak with a certain kind of word, certain kind of speech patterns, by basically their ability to tell stories that are far more than just stories. So it was me taking the adage of the pen is mightier than the sword, that, words are far more impactful than physical means, and actually creating that into words are as powerful as physical weapons, physical actions. And so Sleepwater Beat turned out to be more like, the girl with the dragon tattoo meets X-Men in this, in this very, very near future dystopian sci-fi. So these books are set in, for the majority, the present timeline of these books are set in 2030, 2031. And the timelines go back and forth in kind of a circular pattern between the present timeline and the main characters' past, snippets of their past, and then some interludes in Sleepwater Beat. It was newscasts, news reports, radio shows, and sort of for the masses, 24-hour news cycle, and that was how I did the world building there. And then Sleepwater Beat book 1 was Leo Tiefler's story. She's the main character in that, and she was the first character that I had ever written so much of myself into, and so much of her story is reflective of just so much of my life, and that was not on purpose, but it fit, and I had the experience under my belt to give her as a character and to give the story overall what it needed to continue in the way that I wanted it to continue. And so then, looking at discrimination as a whole, in all its monstrous forms, through various marginalized communities, which Leo in book 1 was a part of in many ways, and touches on drug addiction, drug abuse, and you know, broken homes and homelessness, and then there's the LGBTQ community. And what I wanted to do with these books is shed a brighter light on the different aspects and harmful effects of discrimination by viewing it through a lens of this group of people who have this supernatural ability with their storytelling, which I call the beat. And making that lens into, you know, humanity's propensity to loathe diversity and fight against it through this extra group of people. And so Sleepwater Beat was so well received, and I originally wrote it just as a one-off. I did not intend for it to be a series. And then I realized that there was so much more that I wanted to say, and this book, the first book in the series, became an international bestseller, and it was an award-winning award-winning sci-fi finalist in the 2019 International Book Awards, and it started taking off and got me to a lot of places, which was great. And then I realized that in Sleepwater Beat, you know, I touched on a lot of different marginalized communities and groups of people that face discrimination, and I never touched on race in Sleepwater Beat. So Sleepwater Static became, you know, a passion project of a different variation in terms of this. And so I really poured myself into touching on race and racial tensions and racial discrimination and biracial children and transracial families, and just how that fits into a shifting society, you know, where fear of the unknown and mass panic and eventually hatred are kind of interwoven between these different marginalized communities that I'm speaking about and touching on, and also with these group of people who have this beat spinning ability, which is really where I focus. And the intent through all this was to, you know, highlight these issues and hopefully make them accessible to a much wider audience. You know, people who may not be ready, or who may not know that they're ready, or are not even willing to look at it, to, you know, get a little bit of insight into these topics through, you know, just the course of reading a good story. and that, you know, is something that it's been very close to my heart, and something that I really strove to accomplish with both of these books. And yeah, so Sleepwater Static is actually Bernadette Manny's story. So every book in the Blue Helix series does and will center around a different main character, but each main character is a supporting character in the previous books. So
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's furthering the overall story of Sleepwater, which is this, you know, kind of worldwide underground organization of people with this beat spinning ability, and continuing their story as a whole, as a community, as people who have this ability, and then looking, you know, using different main characters and different storylines as part of that world building, which is super fun experiment, and even better to realize that I actually pulled it off. So,
oh yeah, you seem to have struck a chord with the first book, that's for sure.
Yes, and hopefully I can do the same thing with the second. So there it is.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's a very thorough explanation, and
Thank you.
I'm fascinated by the literalization of the metaphor kind of thing with the, you know, the beat spinning, and of course, but like any like advanced technology or magic system, I do gravitate toward that kind of thing, especially when it has a kind of resonance with the real world. I find that really interesting.
Yeah.
But but setting it so close to our world, you made this point in the beginning. It's overtaken by events. That's a thing that can happen pretty easily in
Yes.
this day and age.
Yes, it was. And it's, it's scary, and it makes it feel like, I mean, when I first so I published Sleepwater Beat in 2018, at the end of 2018. So, we were it was well after I finished writing it. It's right before the elections in 2016. And in a way, I felt like, so many of these things have already in some ways happened, and what's going on. And like, am I just writing to the times? I wrote this years ahead of time, but I have been told by so many different readers and fans and book groups and book clubs that I've gone to speak to, that it is still highly pertinent, and that the stories themselves and having like approached these things within the wider scope of making it a good story has really touched people in ways that I did not expect or even intend. I was trying to write my own observations of society and what was happening, and deliver them in a way that other people may not have taken notice of before. And then I just got feedback that was like, oh yeah, we take notice, and this is so appreciated that it's being seen by other people too. So yeah, I guess I'm writing before the times at the exact same time as things are happening, and I guess I just better keep it up at this point.
Oh yeah, keep running on that wheel. Spin the wheel.
Right.
So I do want to ask you though about the general kind of movement of the story. You said they all move the story forward. Is there a direction? Are these characters actively trying to change the world in these no spoilers, of course, but this is like how far do you think can you see your characters getting in that kind of storyline?
Well, I mean, it is so close to our, current reality, and obviously it's only, 10 years in the future. It's more along the lines of the world is trying to change them. And I don't write a lot of stories where there is a one main antagonist. More often than not, my character's antagonist is either the rest of the world or themselves. And sometimes it's both. So this is, I think that may have something to do with why people are identifying so much with the story, is that it's not about saving the world, and it's not about, no one's taking a ring to
you don't have to defeat
Mount
a villain.
Doom. Yeah, exactly. So this is about how to. It's about the characters overcoming this adversity that they're faced with, and the different nuances between, people who are experiencing the same things and yet have completely different reactions and want completely different things from it. And sort of that, how do we stay true to who we are and the people that we care about and what we want for our lives when all these things are happening around us? So I guess, perfectly reflective of
Oh yeah, it's sadly true. Yeah, that's I don't know how much more I can say about that. I don't really want to get political myself, but it is like, this is pretty bleak out there right now. It certainly seems that way. But I think most people would see it that way regardless where they stand on the actual issues.
Exactly. Yeah.
Weirdly enough, people are in agreement. Things aren't going so well.
Yes, that's true. And, for anyone thinking along the same lines, like, oh, I don't want to get too political about this. These books are not political because that is not where I like to write.
Yeah, but I mean, it's easy. It'd be easy to go with the current events angle here, but I mean, especially because I'm addicted to political news. But we're not going to say any more about that.
Right? Yeah, and and I did not write these books as a response to the political climate, but they line up in ways that still just blow my mind. So it's one of
prescient maybe, or maybe just reflective. Yeah, like you said before.
Yeah, and things that have been on my mind for years and years and years and years and years, and I'm finally coming around to writing about them as the things that I hoped never to see start happening. So I'm not going to claim credit for it,
No, well, it's hard. And why would you want
right.
to?
No, right. I was just going to say Stephen King has been doing the same thing for a long time. So
That's true. And I mean, and then there's there's a movie, I'm not gonna mention the name because even mentioning the name would probably place me in a camp, but I can think of some that would go in this direction too. Anyway, yeah. So just a little bit about the when you're pouring out kind of this kind of what's the word? This kind of powerful internal feelings, that kind of thing. The worldview into the stories. How do you find that flows best? I mean, how do you approach that kind of thing, or do you approach it the same way as your other fiction?
I do. I approach it in the same way as my other fiction, but to a much more detailed and in-depth diving into character growth and interpersonal relationships. So these books are incredibly character driven, just beyond probably anything else that I've done, because of the fact that I was first and foremost dedicated to making this a good story. Like when the characters aren't real and the interpersonal relationships aren't real and the growth isn't in there, to me personally, in my opinion, the story could be anything, but it won't be as good, and it won't be as impactful. This is just my view again.
Yeah, well, we can all have opinions. It's fine.
Yeah, of course. And so I really dove into the characters and the characterization. And by putting in, the little snippets of the main characters' pasts and where they're from and how they got to be who they are when we're following them in the present timeline of the story, was hugely helpful for that. And then with Sleepwater Static, instead of the interludes being of news anchors speaking or radio show hosts, the interludes in Sleepwater Static are letters from the main characters, sort of, who starts out as a pen pal and then becomes a very, very close friend, and a bit more than that later on in the book. And that was how I decided to do world building that way. And so I also, with this book, I was bringing in a lot more history, definitely a lot more Black history, because that, I was writing from Bernadette Manny's perspective, and she's a white woman who is from South Carolina, and that is as close to writing about these things as I felt I could do comfortably and respectfully. But she has, her partner throughout her past scenes that we see, Daryl, is a Black man, and their relationship starts in the late 1970s. So I had to do a lot of research for this, and had to really work on writing, all different stages of society and Black history and American history, and and especially in the South too, writing that through a couple of decades, right, in this story, and so there are little, small snippets of history that I put in there that also adds to that world building and adds to the effects of bringing these stories and these characters closer to home and closer to reality. And then, of course, I get to make things up as I go along, because it is fiction as well. So it was definitely really interesting trying to find that balance between what I wanted to be realistic and to hold true, and then also where I wanted to take things. And that's why I also chose to write this it's not super far in the future, but it is in the future because, gosh, we've already seen how much can happen in the last 10 years and, or even in the last 4 years, in the last 2 years. And so, 10 years
in the
from
last
now,
2
who
months.
knows? Right.
Yikes.
True. And so, yeah. But the short answer to your question is that I focus on characterization, and Sleepwater Static is a lot less. I mean, as as the title perhaps implies subtly, I suppose, there's a lot less action in this book. And part of that has to do with the fact that the main character is a 71-year-old woman.
I was going to say, this is like her whole life kind of driven through this story.
Yeah. And it is with all of the main, I mean, it was with Leo and Sleepwater Beat, and it will be with the other main characters. But this was also the first time that I have written from the perspective of someone who is quite a good deal older than I am, and I found it surprisingly easy. I don't know what that says about me.
I'm not sure either. I mean, I think we're about the same age, so it's kind of an interesting, I don't know.
I wondered, for a time if I was going to be able to pull it off, and I think I did, and I think, maybe I'm at the point in my life. I mean, I'm 30, so like I can say I have experienced enough about not growing old, but about getting older, and about the small nuances of aging that even I started seeing when I was 25. And
I mean, and you've probably seen family members aging and other friends aging, older people, in your life, just like everyone does. I mean,
right. It's always there. And so it's not as hard. It wasn't as hard to put myself in her shoes. And, I still, most of the time, still feel like a 15-year-old. So I could kind of give Bernadette sort of the same. She doesn't act like a 15-year-old, but
no,
there's not, there's really not that much difference in age. I mean, there is, yes, there's wisdom and experience and things that we don't ever see or understand until we get to a certain point in our lives. But it wasn't as hard as I thought. And a lot of my advanced readers were really cheering for her because she is a 71-year-old arthritic badass. So, it was very cool to write about her, and very cool to sort of throw, so many different stereotypes and tropes on their heads, which, as we've talked about before, is what I really love to do. So, it was fun to write someone who, hey, who knows, I may end up very much, well,
maybe
I'm going to say,
I don't want your story takes place too.
I don't want to be exactly like Bernadette. There are choices that she made that I hope I'm never faced with the same choices, but
that's the nature of writing dystopian fiction.
Exactly, right? You all the
or any of this, any dark fiction. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope that they don't, but hey, as it's been proven, things happen anyway.
Yep. So that's fascinating. I think it's a really bold decision to write a character that's older. Just in the later half of the life. That's not even that common.
Yeah, and that's there was part of that too where I when I was writing Sleepwater Beat, Bernadette is a supporting character in Sleepwater Beat, and she just fascinated me so much, and I wanted to know more about her and how she got to who she was when I was writing her at first. And then I realized as I was writing her that, it can be done also in a respectful way that, lends tribute to this entire life that she's had. And I wanted to, touch on, hey, we're not just who we used to be and that's it, right? Like she still has so much power and still takes up so much space and still struggles with being who she turned out to be, and coming back to her past, which is very much a lot of what this book centers around. And that part, keeping those things in mind made it not nearly as difficult as I thought it would be to write her as a main character. And also it helped that I, went back into chapters of her past where she was, 18, 19, 25, 30, and I could grow with her through those at the same time too. And that helped develop her and who she was and who she ended up being.
Yeah.
25 years later, right? So
Wow. Yeah.
it was a great experience. Yeah.
That sounds like an incredible book, actually.
Thank you.
Since we're running low on time, it's time.
Yeah, I know.
What's that title again?
About that. Sleepwater Static, book 2.
And that's out today. If you're listening to this the day it drops, or it's been out for however long this episode has been out.
Right.
They have the same birthday now.
Yay!
Well, Kathrin, thanks for being on the show. It's been awesome, and I'm fascinated listening to this, just describing this story. So I've got to pick this one up, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll love it.
I think I will. All right. Yeah, thanks,
right.
Kathrin. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. And as for this podcast, you can find more of us at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can find my books on amazon.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. Talk to you soon.
That tears it.